Hello students, I hope you're all doing well. Welcome to another video from Quick Study. This video covers legislation and business from topic 1.5, understanding external influences on businesses. And in this video, we are going to learn about the impact of legislation on businesses, which includes costs and the impact or the consequences of not meeting or meeting these legislations. We'll also talk about the purpose of these legislations, which includes the principles of consumer law and the principles of employment law. Alright, so first of all, to understand legislation better, I'd like to discuss a case study. It involves a real China restaurant in 2015 which faced a fine of over £70,000 after 100 diners were hospitalized due to a salmonella outbreak. What the inspectors found was there was rotten meat and other unacceptable practices, and the owners were charged under EU food safety laws. And luckily, this is one of the very few cases that has happened thanks to the very strict food safety laws that UK has, which are some of the most controlled and strict in the entire world. And this goes on to show how strong food safety practices actually protect consumers and ensure high standards. Alright, now to start it off with, let's talk about consumer protection legislation. And there are two pieces of information related to this that you really need to know. First of all, we have got the Consumer Rights Act 2015. It was originally passed in 1893 and it has been updated many times over the years, particularly in 2015 when digital products and services was brought under this act as well. What this allows you to do is basically return faulty items for a refund. For example, the zipper of a particular clothing may not work, or probably you've purchased a vacuum cleaner which is not working after 6 months. So you have the right for a refund for these kinds of products. And some of the key features of this legislation that you should be aware of is that goods that are sold must be fit for the purpose. And of course, they must be free from defects and they should have a good appearance, finishing, safety, and durability. And furthermore, you have the right to a refund or a repair at the seller's expense. And mind you, this is the seller who is getting you the fixing done. It's not the manufacturer. Now, let's talk about the Trade Descriptions Act 1968. And it was originally passed in 1968 and it officially ended 100 years of misleading advertisements. If I had to give you an example, the cigarette brand Heartsease actually used to say that it's good for your heart. We all know that's not really the case. And some of the key features of the Trade Descriptions Act 1968 includes that all advertising, packaging, and public statements that you're making for your products must be demonstrably true. It means they should be able to show you that it actually works, whatever claims that they're making. And it is an offense or to use false or misleading statements to sell your products. And of course, this act carries criminal penalties, which can also include potential jail time. However, there are clever advertising tricks that brands have always used to get around this act. You see, if I have to give you an example, you'll see that a lot of companies will use the claim that they are selling superfoods. But that's not really the case. A lot of the time, scientific research or reports have shown that this is not true. But what they do is they use indirect marketing. Say, for example, a company that is selling yogurt probably has included acai berries in their yogurt. And acai berries do actually have a lot of nutritional properties that scientists claim to be some sort of a superfood. And the Trade Descriptions Act did actually significantly reduce the number of customers being deceived by suppliers. However, there are some tricks that companies still use. Now, let's take a look at some of the other key acts that are in place to protect the interests of the consumers. So first of all, we have the Consumer Credit Act of 1974, and it was updated in 2006, and this act requires that all items sold on credit must have the APR or the annual percentage rate on those items listed. And then we have the Weights and Measurement Act of 1985, which was also updated in 2006. And this act ensures that if a bag has 500 grams worth of materials, if the bag has label on it, it should actually have 500 grams worth of materials in that. And then we have the Food Safety Act of 1990, which was put in place to prevent food contamination, and it essentially requires hygiene training to be given to the sales staff and also for the premises to have regular inspections. And you see, these acts are just here to show that there are so many acts in place to protect the interests of the consumers. You don't really have to know in detail about all these acts. However, what you should understand is that it can be really overwhelming for businesses at times to comply with all these different rules and regulations. All right, now that we have talked a bit about the different kinds of legislations that are put in place to protect consumers, let's talk a bit about the different kinds of employment legislations. So why do you really need employment legislations in the first place? Well, they are passed by the parliament so that workers are not exploited at workplace. And primarily there are three main areas for employment legislation. The first one being recruitment. So the main law that is involved in recruiting new staff is the Equality Act 2010. And what this act does is basically this law combines a lot of the previous acts that are aimed at preventing discrimination in the recruitment process for companies. You see, initially, a lot of the companies were complaining about how their decision-making process is being intervened when it comes to the recruitment processes. However, the law actually has good business logic. You see, there are a lot of benefits that come along with diversity. If you are not recruiting from a wide customer base, you are limiting a lot of the fresh ideas that might have come into your business, right? And if I had to give you an example, Marks and Spencer failed to attract the interest of the younger customer base. And this could have been one of the reasons due to their board of directors not being very diverse, right? If they had a diverse group of people in their management teams who were working towards achieving their business goal, they might be able to target a wider customer base, right? So there's another area of business activity that requires legislation, which is payments. And for that, we have the Equal Pay Act of 1970. Even though this act was established as far back as the 1970s, the payment differences actually still remain significant till date. If I had to give you an example, in 2015, the average man earned nearly 20% more than a woman. And black people has it much worse actually. They earn up to 25% less than white people. You see, this Equal Pay Act may have significantly reduced the payment discrepancies that have existed. However, it's important to note that payment discrepancies exist till date. And thirdly, we have discrimination at the workplace, which affects businesses and the people. And it focuses on the recruitment and position. So as we have already discussed, discrimination in payments of course exists where men receive more payments in comparison to women, or non-whites will receive less payments in comparison to whites. And then there is promotion disparities as well. So recruitment is already a concern, but promotion is even a bigger issue. If I had to give you an example, at John Lewis, 57% of the women in shop floor roles hold only 29% of boardroom jobs. And when it comes to racial disparities, the situation is even worse. In 2016, only 8.9% of managers and director posts at John Lewis went to non-white people. So we clearly understand that there's a need for change, and legislation alone is not really sufficient, to be honest. What it comes down to is individual and social attitudes that also needs to change to achieve true equality. All right, now that we have talked a bit about how consumers are affected by legislation, we should also look at how businesses are impacted by these legislations. So you need to understand that the impact of this legislation on businesses can be significant, and this is often debated among the businesses and the stakeholder groups. So first of all, you need to understand that certain businesses perceive legislation as a hindrance to their growth. Business owners will often feel that legislations cause a lot of time and it takes a lot of their effort and money. They think that excessive paperwork actually takes up all this time, effort, and money that is required. And also, they think that businesses that are operating within a very strict framework or with a lot of rules and regulations find it very difficult to compete with overseas or global companies, because those companies probably are coming from places or countries where rules and regulations are not as strict, right? And a lot of times entrepreneurs might think that rules, regulations, and legislations actually limit their creativity and their initiatives. Particularly, they feel that these legislations aren't really catered to their specific needs. And of course, there are people who are counteractively or who oppose to the fact that legislations are bad for businesses. You see, regulations can actually provide a lot of clarity on what is acceptable and what is not, and they also help to ensure the standards like food safety in cafes. I mean, every cafe, it's very basic that every cafe must have separate fridges for cooked and uncooked foods. And this clarity can actually help or allow managers on improving their processes. And while these regulations may incur a lot of costs, but this is actually necessary for customer protection, and it can actually help you prevent issues like faulty products that could actually harm consumers. I mean, people can actually die from faulty drugs or bad food, right? And of course, the debate on this legislation or the impact of the legislation on businesses, there's been a debate around this. And this actually continues. But with businesses balancing the compliance challenges against the benefits of clarity and consumer protection. And during the credit crunch of 2007 to 2009, there are a lot of major banks that collapsed during that period, right? Because of their own mistakes, they practiced lending monies recklessly due to their own personal benefits, right? And of course, there were government rules and regulations which further sort of fueled the fire, right? Because there were relaxed regulations by the government in place, so they weren't really watching as closely as they should have. And of course, there are key points that you should take away from this. First of all, the collapse had severe consequences for bank managers, the customers, and the shareholders and the taxpayers as well. And the UK government's support for the financial sector peaked at over £1 trillion. And that's a lot of money. And all of this pressure had to be borne by the taxpayers of the country, right? And stricter regulations could have actually prevented issues like that, right? And it could actually mitigate a lot of the risks. All right, so here are some final thoughts on this chapter. So, contrary to political rhetorics, the facts are that there are several international survey organizations, such as the Ease of Doing Business Index, which has ranked UK among the top 10 countries in the world for ease of doing business. So here's the thing. Because of regulations, living standards have significantly improved in UK over the years when you look at historical data, right? And of course, today's environment is much less polluted and it's safer and more pleasant. And thanks in large part due to the effective legislations that are put in place. And also, it is important to understand that legislation plays a crucial role in enhancing the business environment as well as improving overall quality of life. Alright students, with that we have come towards the very end of this video, and to give you a short recap, this is what we have covered in this video so far. We have talked about the purpose of legislation, which includes principles of consumer law, principles of employment law, and we have also talked about the impact of legislation on businesses, which includes the cost and the consequences of meeting or not meeting these obligations. And of course students, I'd like to thank you for watching this video, and if you've liked this video, do subscribe to our channel since we post regularly on different topics and subjects which can definitely help you ace your GCSEs. And of course, for more information on our online one-on-one tutoring services, do visit our website at www.quickstudy.uk. Thank you.